Test. Yes, I'm. 1 2 1 2 test. Okay.
Which one do we use? Which one?
Two is okay.
Either way.
This one we also used to give people.
Phone use which is okay.
Okay, perfect.
And after
The two are open. The two of them are open.
Just one step, one more space. You can take.
So this is open now.
Open now.
Okay, we use this one, and we use later this one for the people. For the people. Yeah, but now.
Now it's on. You can abuse. You can open.
Okay, so let's put the off here
Yeah.
now.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session, Changes for a Global Educational Organization in the Internet Era. First of all, we need to introduce ourselves. My name is Mostaf Matesanwa. I come from Zimbabwe. But I'm currently working for the regional office based in Nairobi. Yes, my colleague here.
My name is Eduardo. I used to be in Catalan Scouting, and now I'm helping from the outside, giving some ideas.
Thank you very much. Just for a brief information about the session, we'll just give a brief, and then we will then interact and discuss. As you could be aware that the session is very broad, so we need to sort of bring it together and see how we can come up with some discussion points. Scouting was never conceived to replace the other education actors, but perhaps to complement them. The idea was mainly based on contributing to the development of young people, for them to have a sense of responsibility for themselves and others. This was to be achieved by involving them at an early stage of life in activities that would be fun, adventurous, achieving in the process some goals that are useful to them as they grow up to become men and women who are responsible citizens within their communities. This aspect has over the years created the togetherness that is being currently cherished by the Scout movement. The values have made it possible for all members to respect and accept other people's thoughts and beliefs. International education has always been in the center of our education action. Citizens, loyal to their countries, but also with sense of global belonging. Individuals with their own beliefs and respectful and understanding with the beliefs of others. Identities, as important as they are human constructs and change with time. As a movement based on diversity, Scouting has a very important role to play to avoid cultural clash and identity conflicts, and to promote tolerance, understanding of differences, appreciation of diversity, and capacity to deal with complicity. Moreover, in the turn of the new century, the development of modern technologies, especially in the communication, has changed the way of living among communities. kids from all over the world could now interact directly online. Likewise, all kind of information is now readily available, making it easier to quickly gather what one needs. This trend has both advantages and disadvantages. Firstly, it is very welcome development that one can easily collect information. On the other hand, it is difficult to avoid some information, especially to young people who may not have the ability to process and make use of the relevant information. How does the movement address these challenges and remain viable? It is very clear that this trend is unstoppable. The only way is to embrace it, at the same time developing mechanisms that will ensure that the members have some guidelines to support them. However, in this session, I think this was a brief introduction, and we know that we are all faced with this challenge. So in this session, we would want to concentrate on 3 blocks. The first one being international education, and the second one being individuals interacting online, and the last one being sharing international education experiences. Those are the 3 areas which we are going to focus on. So we'll start with the first one, international education.
Thank you, Mustafa. I'm going to go here, go close to the internet community, knowing that this is an internet-based session. So the idea, as Mustafa explained, was to break this session in 3 blocks and doing a little bit of giving some thoughts on each one of the blocks and then discuss each one of the blocks separately. Starting with the one on international education. Is this a rock concert in the other section? If you remember, the purpose of the movement says to contribute to the development of young people in achieving their full physical, intellectual, social, and spiritual potentials as individuals, as responsible citizens, and as members of their local, national, and international community. This wording of the, you think that this is kind of background music, no? So, not really, but who knows? All right. So the big question here is, what's the position of international education in our movement? What's the role of international education, and how the changes in our societies affects this international education in Scouting? Well, in Scouting, local roots and national identities are tools that contribute to global citizenship, and global citizenship contributes to limit the expansive trend of national identities and religious identities as well. So we have here a very interesting combination. And if you think about that, if you go to a Jamboree, a World Jamboree, you realize that there is something curious on people trying to show all the elements of their national identities, all the local roots, all the elements that make them be different from the others, in a way that is not as a contrast, but as a mean to share who you are with who the others are. And this is very interesting because there is, in international education, there is always a big debate saying, well, if you develop a lot national identity, what you do is block the possibility of the sense of global belonging. And I think that Scouting has proved in its century of existence that had been able to combine both things. Global citizenship is the element that we always have in front of us to limit when we think that our country is the best or that our religion is the best. And this is something that in the evolution of the first decade of Scouting was very important, because in the first writings of Baden-Powell was saying you belong to the British Empire, one of the best empires existing in the world. And after First World War, that changed radically into there is no nation better than another anymore. That was the consequence of the First World War. And since then, Scouting had been always committed to peace and to global citizenship. And that started with the link to the League of Nations, which was the precedent of the United Nations. So the global scope prevents any exclusionary tendency of the national and religious identities while enabling global citizenship. This is relevant also because we always think, or many times we think in international education, just as something that our kids could have when they go abroad. And I think that is relevant to also reflect on the fact that international education is a tool to better live our own identities in each one of our countries. I would say that there is no Scouting without international education. And this is something that many non-formal educations lack. International education is not just to take a plane and to go to another country. It's to deal with diversity, and to deal it not in a way just of a tolerance, but in a way that we feel or we live this diversity as an enrichment, which is, as I said, something that you find in a World Jamboree. On this, though, there is also the importance of the recognition policy, because we try to live this diversity at world level, knowing who we have on the other side. So recognition policy is the way that World Scouting has to guarantee that at world level, all Scouts share the same values. And that whereas we have cultural diversities and our approaches could be diverse, the reality or the vision of the world that we have is similar. Historically, identities have evolved. There is a beautiful book by Amartya Sen called Identity and Violence that explains many things like the diversity of India, in contrast with the idea that India is just a Hindu country, is one of the countries with highest percentage of Muslim people as well. They had a prime minister that was Jew, huge diversity in a country that from the outside seemed just one thing. Or, for instance, he explains that Europeans are always proud of the tradition of democracy, but democracy was quite rooted in many African traditions, in the local villages, assemblies, or things related with religious tolerance, how 500 years ago Europe was one of the places with the highest religious intolerance, whereas the Arab world was one of the places where religious tolerance was in the highest point. No? But when Scouting started, and I would say all the first half of the 20th century, it was this romantic vision of identities. Like identities were mainly finished processes. You have already a language. You have already ethnic characters. You have already songs. You have already elements that identified what those identities were. So somehow, the idea of international education in early Scouting was sharing this homogeneous difference. So everybody in Canada was similar. Everybody in the United States were similar. Everybody in Denmark was similar. And if you think about that, if you've been in international scout events, we have this beautiful thing called international evenings, where each one of the countries work hard to see which are their mostly known stereotypes to show to the others. And then you have the Irish showing the whiskey, and then you have the Swiss having like chocolate. And we share these stereotypes in a funny way, but we do know that each one of those stereotypes are quite different. I remember when I was living in the United Kingdom that it was a survey among kids to see, you tell me if I'm right on that, which was for them their favorite British meal. And the one that had the most acceptance was curry. So the vision of what identities are, so based on that, in the next international evening, the United Kingdom should take some curry on this. So I have another anecdote on that, which was a delegate that I met in a conference that was from Sweden. She had the head covered. She was a Muslim from Bosnian origin, emigrated to Sweden, and she covered the head while in Sweden. So many of the elements that were basically defining identities as a homogeneous communities had changed in our countries. So when we talk about international education, we should always think how this diversity affects our way to deal with international education, knowing that international education is not anymore saying we are homogeneous, let's see how homogeneous are the others, and let's learn about their experience, but dealing with more complex societies. In some Western countries, it had been a reaction against what has been called intercultural approach. So the intercultural approach means there are several cultures living together, and they have to learn how to not just live together, but interchange, interconnect, and somehow influence one to each other. The negative reaction to that had been something called ethnopluralism. Ethnopluralism is something that people going to New York like a lot to see. They like to go to Chinatown and get some Chinese food. They like to go to Little Italy and get a pizza. And they like to go to some Jew neighborhood and get some kind of kosher food. But ethnopluralism is precisely the contrary of what we live in most of our societies, which is something that in New York itself, a couple of weeks ago, I went with friends to the Halloween celebration parade. And we later on went to, it was so packed, so we tried to find some place to eat. And we found this Mexican food place with burritos and stuff that was totally managed by Chinese people. So somehow this is the new reality that we face in our societies. So my suggestion on that, and with this I would like to open the floor to discussion on this element of international education. I think that we have two challenges. One is to enable young people to deal without fear to this new reality, to avoid them to have the fear to the difference, to make them protagonists on building the new identities of their communities. When we say that we want them to be responsible citizens, it means that we want them to be able to build how society should be, how communities should be. And part of this building is also the building of the identity. And we have to empower them of the capacity to dream on a new way. The second challenge to me is to use the new technology to appreciate difference and to empower individuals to be truly protagonists of their community's future. And we could do that, and this is something that we are going to deal with in the third block, sharing information, sharing experiences of what Scouts are doing in many different countries. So new technologies could show us that what we live in our society, the contradictions that we feel because I'm half Jew, but I'm half Irish, but I, excuse me? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. So each time that we try to deal with diversity, um, we with new technologies we could help kids to understand that when they are living in with their diversity, they are also seeing other people who have similar diverse realities. Um, a few weeks ago, I watched a documentary explaining how cities could be built in a participatory way. And this documentary said that when, do you all know Lego? From Denmark, probably you know it. So you all know what Lego is. This is a game where you could build with little blocks. You could build houses, you could build walls, you could build everything. So that said, when you give to a person, you give Legos to build things, what your temptation, you feel a little bit like if you were a god. And you build from the top to the bottom. And you build cities like Hong Kong. You build cities that are very vertical. But what they said is when you give kids the capacity to think how they want their cities to be, they tend to think in a different way. They tend to think how they could interact with others, how they could have shared spaces. And they were saying it's very different when you have the temptation to plan something from the top or when you try to empower people to think how cities should be. I think that this is a beautiful metaphor of how we approach international education. We want to empower our kids to be able to build their societies, not to just be the guardians on how identities had been until the moment. And I think that these diverse societies give us beautiful opportunities to deal with that in a different way. And I don't know, Mustafa, if you think that we could start on maybe discussing that and having your thoughts on this. Thoughts, reactions, ideas. You have the micro here. You could come here if you want to see our friends. International education. Education. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Eduardo, I'm actually not sure I fully understand the context of what we're discussing. So could you clarify the issue that we're discussing? You said a lot of interesting things, but I'm not really, I understand the purpose.
All right. I thought that was a little bit framed by Mustafa, but I'll go again on that. We were asked to talk about international education in the context of changing societies. So we realized that this international education could be analyzed not just as it was done in 1920 in the First World Jamboree, but also in a society where for the first time in history, our individual members could connect each with each one. So we had, for 100 years, we had pen pals, people sending a letter to another part of the world and having a friend who answered the letter. Now what you have is that after a Jamboree, you could have your friend from Canada and you are in Australia and you are friends and you share not just ideas, but what you do in your group, how you are, which kind of struggles you have. So what we wanted to discuss in this session was, first of all, how international education changes, now that societies are more and more diverse, and now that we also have new ways of connection that makes both virtual communication and physical communication much easier than ever. The second thing that we wanted to discuss is, which is the second block, is how the fact that individuals could interact among them change the way scouting internationally is working and how this affects international education. Until now, what you had, if you were a scout group, you went to your international commissioner and you said, I want to do an activity, and then you go to the activity. Now what we have is that people could connect directly with other people and share experiences, share documents, share videos of events, and even directly connecting to do some kind of interchange. And that changed both the organization, but also the educational approach. And the third thing, which is a little bit minor that we wanted to discuss, is how this could help to share experiences among the associations, both in international education, but also in the fact that because we are a global movement, we could learn from each other, and the fact that communications now are much easier could help us to work on that. Sorry if we weren't clear on the beginning. So the idea would be that now we discuss a little bit this element on how do you think that international education is changing in your association or in your vision on how scouting works, both having societies that are more and more diverse, and also having the possibility of people to interact more easily with people from other nationalities, from other origins, etc.
Yes, Edward. As you said, you gave some really good ideas here. I'll go on the X. And there were some things I was thinking about, because I know from reading the history of scouting that there was a huge struggle in the early days about, those who saw it as a military thing, those who saw it as an expression of nationhood. I think that we're coming up to the 100th anniversary of the First World War, a cataclysmic event that in many ways changed ideas about nationhood and about what was important about being a nation. One thing that struck me about scouting, and I think it picks up on what Baden-Powell saw in the 1920s as he moved to peace education, is that scouting allows young people to be proud of their country without being competitive with another country. It creates a unique platform for that. And it's to be seen at the World Jamboree, it's to be seen in international scouting, that you're allowed to be proud of being Irish or British or French, and still to feel a brotherhood and kinship with people across the world. And I think that's a very special thing that we have in scouting, which gives us a very practical platform. In our own country, we went through 40 years of terrible distress. And in the darkest, deepest days, scouting reached across the national divide. And I think that was a hugely positive thing. Before politicians ever caught up with us, scouting had built brotherhood. And I see my brother David, who's from that part of the world as well, would see this. And I think, so there's a real practical possibility for scouting to help to build peace because we have that kind of international platform. It's hard to think of another organization that has anything like it.
I think from looking at the technological possibilities we get from the internet, it is very, very difficult for us to do much other than just try to keep up. Scouts will be where they go. They will be on the next social platform. Right now, Scouts are on Facebook. They probably won't be there in 5 years. And I don't think we can do much to... I will. Okay. Where was I? we can't... Yeah, they will move on to the next platform, and if we want them to meet each other, We need to use those platforms to create a forum for them to meet. Right now, when I see my scouts, well, they interact internationally through Facebook and other, but they interact with other scouts that they have met physically on camps. So they don't go out and find purely cyber friends in scouting. They meet up and they connect over the internet. So if we want to do something, we need to take the platforms that are and create forums with those platforms. Yeah, didn't get out quite well, but
No. I think that you were very clear. My suggestion, though, is that we discuss this point in this second block, because both things are very interesting, but the temptation to deal only with the fact that individuals now could interact among them is that we forget another discussion which is also relevant, which is how we deal with international education or education to diversity in societies that are more and more diverse. So it would be nice if we could have outcomes to both things. But you're totally right, and this is something we should deal with as well.
So the experience to date with Messenger Peace platform is, sorry, okay. So the experience to date so far on the Messenger Peace platform, which is the biggest social media network that we actually have, is that there is two types of interaction. And the first type is, hi, I'm Collie, I'm from Ireland, or whatever. And it's just simple conversations like that. On the other side, you have people who are uploading detail of a project. But there is no discussion. There's no discussion taking place on social media. And what we have to move towards is what we call social objects to talk about. An example would be the Jota weekend or other. So we actually have to pose subject matter for them to talk about, rather than expect discussion just to take place on a particular subject. So we have to orchestrate discussion agendas or subjects, and then people will engage. So for example, we could say talk about pioneering as a subject or something, or camping. Then we'll get a lot of views and expressions of views. So there's I think there's going to be a kind of a tiered system or an educational system where we build up and create this atmosphere where they go from superficial kind of conversation to deep meaning conversation. So that's our observations to date. It's just because the social media is there doesn't mean that people are talking there. If you analyze what's happening on Facebook, there's no discussion going on. I went to the movies last night. Did you see that film? There's no deep or meaningful discussions going on a lot of these forums. So for people like me or older people who think that there's loads of things going on Facebook, it's very low-level stuff, really, you know.
Craig Turpey from the UK. Following on from that, I think that's a very good point. I think in response to the question, I think international education is much more important than it's ever been, particularly amongst our older age sections, where increasingly they're seeing themselves as citizens of the world, interconnected, interdependent. And I think there's a challenge for us when it comes to helping our adults who are supporting them to ensure that they have the skills to go beyond just the connecting each other and move to action. And I think we also have a responsibility to move beyond the idea of consuming international experiences, of going to jamborees, of going to moots, of going to things that are organized by your associations, to getting to a point where young people can co-create activities that they and others then want to participate in, which is about the social action and going beyond just where we're at the moment, I think. And I think there's an appetite for it, but I think there's a need for us to modernize in how we look at international education, not as something which is on the edge of what we do, but actually something that is central to what we do. Increasingly, that's more important.
There is one comment online.
Okay, I just received one comment from the chat room. The only imagination is a limitation. Technologies now permits to start thinking of international units and international projects with regional patrol from all over the world.
Maybe I think one aspect here is maybe we are more of how the internet works, but I think when we also look at the aspect of education, there's the issue of e-learning. And the e-learning, as we know, our organization, we've been so much close to, for example, the Wujbet trainings. In each country, we're so much closed, but the leaders now will have opportunities of seeing what others are doing, and some may want to even do those which are not, maybe the association may not want them to do in line with what those countries are doing. Those are some of the challenges we are saying. How do we go about it? These are some of the challenges. Someone will just come and say, I did my wood badge online. Can I get awarded? I did with Australia or online and so on. So it affects the education aspect. It's a good thing, but is it what we would want? What would be the solution to ensure that those things, if they happen, we are okay? Do we need to then standardize this as WUSM, so that if I want to do and I just take a program and I know it's in line with what the movement wants? So these are some of the challenges.
Thank you very much. I'm Lars Kolin from Denmark. I would like to broaden the perspective of this discussion. I think we have seen also in some of the comments that we have had that there is a tendency, once a new technology emerges, that you continue to do the old things, just applying the new technology. Earlier we had pen pals, now we write emails, but it's sort of basically about the same thing. We're just using a new technology. The emergence of the internet is such a radical change that it changes the very basis for what we're doing. For instance, let me just give you an example of that. Today, we are organized in local units, in districts, national scout organizations, and then, of course, regions, etc. That was done because the communications means was so different. Had we organized scouting today, we would have probably done it very differently from that. And I'm not arguing it should be done in a specific fashion. I'm just arguing that we should see the technology as a much broader enabler than just what it was. And let me just give you one more example. We used to send out scout packs once per month, and it was a one-way communication. Now we send it out about once per week, and it's still a one-way electronic communication. And we have not rethought the point that we are now able to have a much more dialogue-based communication, for instance, by writing a weblog or what have you, a different way of doing it. So my argument is that for international education, it's just not only about putting power to what we've previously done, it is to see the whole thing in a new perspective. And I think that perspective is the perspective that scouting basically is about empowering young people to lead positive change in their local communities and wherever they are. That's the essence of scouting. And the technology now enables us to do that on an international scale, which could change the whole notion of international education in scouting fundamentally. And that's what I hope we can discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. just a comment both on Lars and Craig, because I think that we are going to the core of the discussion, which is to see that we come from a tradition. I was international commissioner many years ago, and I remember that in that time, we international commissioners were like these special people in the association who went to these events that the rest of the people of the association thought that were quite useless, and discuss about things that the rest of the people of the association couldn't understand. And we went there and discussed these big things, etc. So this traditional vision of international commissioners, the ones that allow the group to go somewhere or to have this relation, has changed. And as the concept of identity has changed. So I think that this is a great opportunity to do both what Craig was saying, which is to discover that international education is not something additional that we have there in the international team, but is in the very core of the Scout education, because it's education on diversity. And we have a great tool, which is that we belong to a global movement. And we also have the transformation of communication that Lars was saying, that is not just the way of before you have a newsletter and now instead of being on the mail, you have it on the email, but it allows the interaction of individuals. And this is growing in a very fast way. And the big problem here is that this affects the core way on how we work. And we are always a little bit lazy to change things that had been working like this for decades and decades and decades. But this is also a great opportunity, because if you think about that, there is no other youth organization who has been as prepared as we are to face this diverse society and this kind of new world intercommunicated. And this is for us a big asset that we have to use. And this is something that is quite exclusive for us. Sorry for the...
This is just an observation as far as the information technology is concerned. Technology creates a borderless world, but at the same time, it also deprives other scouts with less or no access to the information technology. So perhaps it's one thing that we can consider in terms of bringing the framework or the platform of information technology to this community with less access to the information technology. In that way, they can be part of that international education.
Well, one of the things that we discussed with Mustafa, particularly on the Africa region, was whether when we talk about the impact of communication technologies was something mostly of developed countries. And what's happening is that the evolution of technology is so fast that in many countries they are just jumping some of the steps of the developed countries. So they don't know, I mean, you had countries where telephone was not that spread, but now you have wireless telephones and this is already there. Mustafa was telling me some numbers of, could you remind me that the percentage of people in Africa that had access to internet that was growing?
It is now over 70%. As you said, that technology is coming. During this Congress, there is a EU report system which now uses SMS messages to communicate. And the system does not need a smartphone. You can use any phone. You SMS to a center, and you get a response, and you are able to trace what the people need. So Uganda Scout Association is now using that to collect information, not only on scouting issues, but on other social issues. So it's a great achievement as well.
So what I would say is that it's not that international education must be developed on international information technologies, but that we could use the development of information technologies to to go deeper on the traditional concept of international education and transform it, putting it in the core of our education activity. More thoughts on that?
Just a very brief one, which I think is connected, which is I think we can also look at technology as an enabler for improving the quality of the international experiences that young people have. In the past, a lot of effort would be put into getting young people to participate in an international activity, and when they arrive there, they have to do a lot of breaking down barriers and so on. New technologies are allowing us to do all of that, or much of it, in advance, which means that when people land on the ground, they're able to get into substantive discussions on important issues and engage immediately with their peers. And there are examples of that with activities that associations run, but with one that I'm familiar with that is running in Europe with Roverway, with thousands of participants, getting teams of people aged 16 to 22 to talk to each other before they arrive at the event is a great way of breaking down barriers and therefore maximizing the time that they've got when they're on the ground to focus on what's important in terms of quality program. The regional directors at the back there, you may be able to answer. No, I can answer for you, David, if you want. Mixed, I think, in part because of some of the reasons that we've kind of been exploring here, that there are those associations and those people who are quite excited about the potential for technology to enable those kind of discussions, and then others who are just less excited. But I think increasingly, over the years that Roverway has evolved, more and more that contact is happening anyway. There's a natural curiosity, I think, particularly in that age range, to know, well, who is it that I'm going to be meeting with? Who is it that I'm being partnered up with? Where do they come from? Let's have a look at their Facebook profile before we go. Let's have a look at the photographs. Where do they come from? And starting asking questions of each other.
So I'm going to suggest something a bit more radical than all that, which is there is a possibility at the World Jamboree in the US, which would be the one after the next one in Japan, because it'd be hard. But those people who are arriving there don't no longer camp in contingents, but they camp as patrols, international patrols, which are designed through internet. They go there. They take the step that you've taken in Roverway, but they go a bit further. They actually camp together for 2 weeks, and the whole experience is truly international and not something that happens between 9 to 5, and then we go back to our own contingent tents. But maybe that's a step too far. I think young people might be interested, but adults may not be. Sorry, if we don't come up with ideas like that and make them happen, they'll never happen. So we need to throw out those radical, beyond belief ideas and make them happen, and not just wait. Because somebody else will do it. We'll be saying, oh, we should have thought of that, the YMCA thought of that. We have the capacity ourselves to really make radical changes and to do it, but we have to have the bravery or the, I don't know what the word is. We probably have the enthusiasm, but we have to be brave enough to take the next step to make it happen, you know.
Yeah, the courage to explore also, no? To try new things.
Hi, I'm Kingsley Davis. I'm from Australia. I want to say that the King's not wearing any clothes. And I think that this topic, in part, has been beautifully done by yourself. You've really put a lot of work into it, and thank you. But I think it's a constructed topic, if I may say so. Can everyone hear me, by the way? E-learning is very well developed in Australia. We're using it for our introductory work, for our basic work, and we're well into it, using it for advanced work. But there are really significant disadvantages. The advantages are that it's very much quicker to do the theoretical learning, the knowledge, the body of knowledge. It allows more standardisation across the country. Ultimately, it will allow a lot more standardisation across the world. But make no mistake, our learning curriculum is not basically altered. It's the way that we're trying to present it. So that means that when we come to reflection and discussion of the sort that was being talked about this morning, we actually have to do it on a face-to-face basis. Why are we holding this conference where we're all together? Why didn't we just all sit around our screens and just put ideas in? Because we're not going to respond. I may be wrong, but my impression is that the young people, without being standoffish, use their mobiles and other devices for reactive comments. It's very quick swapping of views. It's not substantial reflective material that gets exchanged. So that when we want to talk, for instance, about aims and principles and laws and values and society and what will bring about a better understanding in the world, we have to do it on a face-by-face basis. That's one of the disadvantages. So I don't see that the changes in electronic learning are helping that. The second thing is we're finding in Australia, instead of having lots of residential courses, we only have it towards the end of the training, and they don't get the feeling of community, of camaraderie, of working together as a movement. It's an in and out process dealt with at extraordinarily high speed. Our courses have been contracted because we're almost apologising for getting them there. And when they're there, they say, gee, I wish we'd done this earlier. It's really terrific. And if we'd known it was this good, we wouldn't have minded if it was a day or 3 extra. But you've got to get them there. So we're losing that. We're losing the capacity, as I say, to deal with development of skills. So someone mentioned a bit earlier that why aren't we using social media for pioneering and camping? And I classify that as outdoor activities. Why aren't we using it? Because it's pretty hard to do pioneering and first aid and various other practical activities. I run advanced practical outdoor activity courses over the internet. I challenge anyone to tell me how you can really do it. You might be able to draw tying knots, but you can't actually do it. So in the end, I think that the internet is not, in the long term, able to change things. We still have to do substantial stuff, eyeball to eyeball. We still all have to sit around and talk and have this valuable exchange of ideas. And the training we give in substance has to be this in this way. And a vision of having it done by electronic media is just fantasy. And in my respectful view, it's not going to give us the outcome that we've had traditionally and the substantial outcome that we want to achieve. That's how I feel.
Thank you. But I think that it has been a confusion because the topic had been international education and interaction of individuals in a global movement, nothing related with electronic learning. So what we are talking is international education is on the core of the educational action of Scouting since the beginning, but we have now societies that are more and more diverse. How we deal with this international education, and in the way that Craig was saying, we have the opportunity to put international education in the core, in the nucleus of the educational activity of Scouting, and not just as a complement. This was one thing. The other thing was we have a movement that was created 100 years ago where, as Lars was saying, we had no possibility of the individuals from different countries to connect among them in a fast way. So the maximum thing that we could have is sending a letter from one country to another. But what we have now is that individuals could interact in a global movement, which is something that influences international education, because one of the things that people working on international education explain is that international education is mainly something that you have to experience. And that is why World Jamborees were created. That's why international activities exist. That's why development projects exist. And somehow we face that we have a global movement since the beginning of the 20th century, And in the beginning of the 21st century, we have communications that allow us to work on this global movement in a different way. So it was not talking about e-learning. We're not saying that Scout activity should be done now on internet. What we say is that this living of the international community is now very different because individuals could interact. It is true, as our friend said, that sometimes you create a platform and people don't use it. But remember that everybody explains that what happened in Egypt couldn't have happened without the existence of internet. So it's not just that people put pictures and make fun of what you did last weekend. There are some more important things and relevant things. And somehow what we have to see is if we could use this to develop as a tool to develop our international education. And also, this is something that I wanted to deal with in the second part, but we're already in the second part. So it's how we deal with the recognition policy. Because for the first time in history, individuals could interact, but also we have had for our 100 years of history, the device to know who we had in the other side. So we don't know if our kids from Manchester are connecting with someone in Uganda that are called Scouts, but they are not Scouts. They are part of a right-wing movement that are called Scouts. So somehow the device of recognition that was very well managed in the time of international commissioners, now it's something that should be somehow rethought as well, because we need some kind of device to avoid that people start using the term or the label scouting to be part of this kind of world, let's say, network, using it to promote values that goes against what scouting wants.
Thank you. I'll retrace a bit here. International education, diversity in society. Well, hooray! Society is catching up with scouting. Doesn't mean we lean back and just say, well, that's good. We won. But basically, when we look at programs, starting with the why are we doing what we're doing? How are we doing it, and what are we doing? I mean, when we look at the technology, it's what are we doing? We can change, we can do new activities, we can do things in a new way, but it's not going to change fundamentally the Scout method. We may change our idea of what is a patrol, but that doesn't fundamentally change what we mean with the patrol system. We might even, at times, broaden our perspective of what is nature. It could be a virtual experience from time to time, where you could take a walk in a virtual land with a virtual patrol. I don't know. But it doesn't fundamentally change what we mean when we say nature in the Scout method. So it's enabling new activities. It's enabling us to do the what in different ways, but it doesn't really change the why or the how.
Here? Just here? Oh, that's fantastic. That's a nice spot. I like that. Are these important as well? Are these like the Elf Rangers? Yeah. Oh, fantastic. How exciting. Okay, so my name's Jim. I'm the lead volunteer on the new program in the UK, and I'm a bit of an IT addict, I've got to admit. I think when I have an opportunity to implant something in my head, when I have an opportunity to implant something in my head that connects me to the internet, I'll be there first in line. I think as human beings, we are hardwired to deal with the whole awkwardness face-to-face. I think there's something about our evolution that lets us introduce ourselves to strangers and get along with each other face-to-face. And I think the reason I was disappointed before this event is I had no clue who on earth all the other people were registered on these various websites. And I think the reason that we get more chatter, more communication after an event rather than before is because we've done that thing at the event that we're really good at, that over various thousands of years of evolution we've perfected. We've got on with other people, we've met other people, then we can chat. And the great thing about the internet, of course, is it's incredibly impersonal. Sorry, Lars, I do apologize. I'm getting exciting. I don't know if any of you guys know about First Facebook, which is a scouting sort of focus group on Facebook. When First Facebook works well, leaders are sharing ideas about program. They're sharing things they've done with their young people. When First Facebook works incredibly badly is when somebody says something that somebody else has misinterpreted, and because it's not face-to-face, you're missing all that communication that we're good at, and then a slagging match ensures, and it's hilarious to watch, and everyone enjoys it. I think the internet will help with post-event communication. I'm kind of interested. In the UK, we have kind of two types of international activity. You either go somewhere international and do something international, so you go and visit another country or host some people, or you spend an evening doing something that might be an activity in another country. So you maybe make food that's associated with another country, or you might play games, or you might learn some language. I wonder if the internet has an opportunity to create a shared experience. I wonder if using the internet we could start with other groups, having something in common, sharing an event, an activity, making something together. I don't quite know how it would work. Probably wouldn't work very well to start with. And that might create that impetus to then communicate afterwards. I wonder if that gave us something in common. If my Cub Pack built something virtually connected to another Cub Pack and then started talking about it afterwards, I wonder if that would break down that barrier a little bit. I can almost see like a video screen and two meeting places. I don't know. I think the internet's cool, but it probably doesn't help. I agree with you in many ways.
One of the big worries about young people and technology is that they'll individualize on technology. And out our back window, my son's pal, I can remember, it's a few years ago, you know, his bedroom light was on and he looked like the lonely kid. And he spent a lot of time on the internet on his own. And that is characteristic of what's happening worldwide. The challenge for us in technology and learning and scouting is to make sure that whatever they do is enhancing the peer experience and is collaborative. If it isn't that, we shouldn't do it. It's actually opposite to our method. So even within the context of the way technology is used in a lot of schools, and Lars, I think you're quite right, it has been used to map onto the way previous learning models were. So an example of that is the creation of the computer science lab at the end of the corridor, to lock the technology down there for fear it might get out and interfere with the classroom. So it's completely opposite to the way young people actually use technology. And so they go down to the computer lab maybe for a 45-minute period, once or twice a week. And the teacher says things like, are we all on the one screen? Now, that's absolutely opposite of what young people do in terms of how they relate to technology. But one of the big worries is that it's actually encouraging an individualization. And it's a real problem. A lot of parents, because they've been spooked by the media about the dangerous place for their children is out on the street or playing, where actually that's probably the safest place. And the most dangerous place could well be on the internet, in many ways for them. Yeah, they can get seduced. We've got massive amounts of something like 60, 70% of internet traffic is pornography. You know, so that's the reality and the challenge for us. We've got a method that's very rich in the way it connects young people. If that can be done in a blended context, the way Collie's been talking about it, there's positive stuff here. But if it happens that we're creating individuals or singletons and we're perpetuating that, we'd be better off we didn't have it.
Yeah. Let me do the facilitator thing, which is to try to focus a little bit the discussion, because there is another group, I don't remember exactly in what moment, that deal with new technologies, Facebook. It's called Facebook, Internet, and something else. This one is going to deal with these issues. Here we try to focus a little bit more on the international education, global educational movement issue. So how we use that to rethink international education and evolve the way our educational movement works at world level. Because the internet thing could be something that we could speak for days. So I'm trying to focus a little bit for our reporters, then have some conclusion.
As for international education, or whatever education we're doing in scouting, it's funny we're sitting here and talking about how we're going to do it. We do know what we want to do. We do know the values we want to transmit to the young people, but why don't we ask the boys? Why don't we ask the girls how to do it? I say, why don't we ask the boys how to do it?
So you mean, well, yeah, the ask the boy somehow, I would say that it's already happening with the boys asking among them, no? This is also a big change. Sometimes happen that associations that are too much led by adults, at the end the boys speak among themselves and try to find alternative ways. And I think that might be also happening in many Scout realities. Yeah, Lars.
I'll just briefly try to maybe answer this. I'm just coming from the session we've done on the values of Scouting, and we did a survey before the starting of the session. We distributed the survey to all 6 regions and asked young people about different things. One of the questions was, do you think that 40 million people can actually share the same values? And the second question, which also might be interesting for this discussion, is Scouting helping you be more tolerant towards other societies or respect more other societies? So the answers we got for the first question, is it possible that we all share the very same values, was instantly yes. But then when participants were listing which are those values, they listed completely or somewhat different things. The answer to the second one, I should also mention that we targeted young people who have grew up in the movement. So we asked for the participants who are in the movement long enough so they can reflect on their personal development throughout the movement and actually be objective about it and critical thinkers. And the answer to the second question, is Scouting helping me actually tolerate and respect other societies, was yes, with the big, let's say, with a big explanation that was more in line on, through the Scouting, I've learned that there are other societies. The highest we got was, I became even curious about other cultures. And these are people who are in the movement for 20 years, and they're in their mid-20s or early 30s now. So we thought that was very interesting, because while we might think that we create young people who are excellent communicator and very respectful and so on the other side, the responses we got for this particular session, but also from some other surveys before, was that people are not that familiar even with other cultures, let alone they probably do respect because of the whole system of commitment to the values and so on. But their knowledge is on the level of, I do recognize that some people around the globe do different things differently. And there is one more thing. We talked a lot about the role of the adults in this, basically shaping this, or trying to get the most out of the international education. And one of the comment was, or actually one of the conclusions, was that the adults now, the society now, or the societies now, are changing rapidly and much faster than they used to change, which also means that we need adult leaders who are able to adapt more rapidly and to respond to the changes which are happening in order to pass on this educational experience. So, in other words, 50 years ago, things were not happening around the globe so fast, so you could have adult leader as a role model to be there and to stay for some time. But now we need a different, I wouldn't say different paradigm, but a different perspective when we are talking about the education. And are we still relying on adult leaders when we're talking about international education in specific and things which are moving so fast?
Thank you. I would like to take the point you were making in your introduction. You said that, or maybe also other people said that in the past, international education had basically two components. One was to go places and visit other scouts, camp with them, etc. And the other one was that you were either reading about or doing something which could easily be a stereotype for what they were doing in another country. Could be a game, could be a meal, or whatever it could. The point I would like to make is that the emergence of the internet technology opens a lot of opportunities to enrich that international experience. Of course, first of all, to follow up on people having met each other physically, but there's a lot of other things we can do. And what I would like to urge you guys to is to meet that opportunity the same way as Baden-Powell met the challenge from cinemas, which he describes in Aids to Scoutmasterships in 1918 or whatever it was. He said, Scouting is facing tremendous competition from cinema, and it's really hard to get the young chaps not to go to the cinema and really take them to Scouting. And then he describes how a good Scout leader could take cinema and use that to the advantage of Scouting so that it could support what we're doing in Scouting. And I think it is that attitude that we need to apply to the internet, and not the negative attitude saying all of the things we cannot do. Thank you.
Jolly good. Hello. I think that there are some arguments going on in the room which don't necessarily move our conversation forward. The internet is no more than a connecting tool. That's all it is. It does not have to replace first-hand experience. It doesn't have to replace the written word on paper, but it is a way of connecting young people together and adults together. And one of the things that I think that we may be able to do in the future is to help young people to connect, and I'm not talking necessarily about global education anymore, because I don't think our next generation will see themselves as global citizens. They will just see themselves as connected citizens around the whole of the world. Our generation is the globally connected generation. The next generation just won't even consider it. But what we may be able to do is to use the educational part of Scouting that we call reflection through the internet. Already, I'm seeing young people who have taken part in real experience in terms of their expeditions and their service to the community, beginning to communicate with other young people around the world and talking about and reflecting on those experiences. We already now have, through scout.org, the opportunity for young people to post their experiences and reflect on them. Of course, at the moment, those reflections are relatively short and not necessarily particularly well considered. We're at the beginnings of this sort of communication. And elsewhere, in non-formal education, I'm seeing leaders using the internet to help young people to reflect on their experiences with others around the world in a way that they could never have done before. Kids learning, for instance, about horticulture, and then being able to talk to somebody in a completely different climate than their own, but discovering they're both doing a similar scout badge and comparing their experiences. Kids in the north of Canada talking about their expeditions by kayak with young people in the United Kingdom who are doing a trip down the River Wye on a canoe and discovering that their worlds are way different, and yet they have similar experiences. That, for me, is where I think the world of scouting is going to move. It is not to replace the first-hand experience, but it is to broaden and deepen it by allowing scouts from around the world to be able to share their experiences, reflect effectively, and come to understand what it's like to be part of humankind.
Bob Taylor from Australia. One of the things you talked about was that the international was on the edge of the program. One of the things you need to do to put it in the middle of the program, how might we do that? Now, one of the things would be in the award schemes to reward the connections that are made through the internet. I don't think we actually do that. There's a sort of badge on the outside for some of those sorts of things. And that's critical in terms of, in Australia. You talk about connective. I mean, it took me 4 hours before we left the country to come here. We're very much far away. And Australia's a huge country, and even connecting between our states is a challenge. And the internet's made a huge difference in terms of doing those sorts of things. And we can connect with the Kiwis, but they're just across the ditch. And so we only talk about them, of course. We don't talk about rugby. We only talk about cricket when we talk to the Kiwis. And these are important cultural things that we do. Because I think in Australia, I mean, as an emigre to there, we don't realise what the other parts of the world, we go to Singapore or China or India, we don't do that. And we need to use those techniques. And that's the question, how do we do that? Perhaps the award schemes are rewarding those sort of things through the internet rather than the older food and all those sorts of things. That might be something we might think about, and that really reflects to the program people, and measure and reward them when they've done something that's a tick against Queen Scout or a Scout Medallion, because they've used that thing. That might be something that we should consider.
Thank you. Additional thoughts? Following something that John said, the third block that we wanted to discuss was precisely, as a global educational movement, how we could use this tool to share experiences. So one interesting thing this morning, Dominique Bernard was talking about that, was that in many associations, we have the tendency to try to do a list of activities, describe them, putting in a book, and giving to someone to see which activities they could do and repeat the activities. And somehow that gives more security because we know which activities work, and at the same time that makes the movement much weaker because instead of focusing on a method that it's endless inventive, we just do a finite list. But it is true that for many years, the communication among countries, and that had been very important in Europe because it's a place, it's probably the place in the world where you have more countries in less territory. So mobility was much easier, and that helped associations to be influenced one to each other and until now in many ways. So evolutions, methodological evolutions, the question of co-education, the question of the older section, many of these things were the consequence, the changes, the consequence of associations knowing what happened with each other. But now we have experiences that could be useful from Western countries, from developing countries in many different ways. I remember when in the last World Scout Conference, it was this video of Scouts of IT saying, well, what we do in IT, talk about after the earthquake, what we do in IT, this is the real scouting, which is service for community, and not just the scouting of like a leisure time. And I think that on that, I felt that it would be very useful for Scout associations, but particularly for Scout groups, to know experiences on how social interaction, social involvement, a community service, etc., is being done in other countries. So the possibility that the internet gives us also, as an educational global movement, is to be able to share experiences in a way that we could see other ways to approach the same thing that we've been doing like this, because this is how in our association or in our group had been done forever. So somehow using not just as a tool for individuals to communicate among them, but also for groups to learn and to have new ideas on how to challenge their vision of scouting and not to be in the comfort zone of doing what they had been doing always. Do you think that that makes some sense?
I really wish it would be that easy. I think experience shows when people go on the internet, they seek the knowledge they want. They don't go out and, generally, people don't go out and challenge their own view of the world on the internet.
Yeah, but if you are a global movement and you have this goal, you could put the means for making it possible. So I'm not saying that sporadically that happened. I'm saying that if this is desirable, that could be a tool or that could be a goal that as a global movement we could promote, a way to do some kind of standardized and well-filtered experiences that could be useful in all over the world. I remember that maybe 15 years ago, it was, I don't remember if it was the World Scout Foundation or the Europe region. I don't remember something that was called successful experiences, and you have these successful experiences, but the ones who received these successful experiences were the international commissioners, and the international commissioner took the successful experience and put it, I don't know, somewhere for someone to come and see it. But now we have the tools for these kind of experiences to be available for everyone, and everyone, not just the international commissioner, but just a group that could know that the approach on environment in Australia could be very helpful to do something similar in Liverpool. That's what I mean.
Yeah, I think, the idea is brilliant. What I'm saying is not that it can't be done, but it is not just to make the opportunity. It's not just to put the things on the internet. You also need to take leaders in the group by the hand and show them how to use it. And you need to take them by the hand and get them interested in using it.
I would say the other way around. When something is useful, people use it. You don't need to take people from the hand. I mean, no one was interested whatsoever in Facebook. The growth of Facebook in the speed that it did, it was not because they were watching advertisements on CB saying, go to Facebook, it's going to be fun. It spread because it was useful. So the question is, if you do useful things, the things are going to be used. That's my feeling. Oh,
yeah. Here comes another comment from Trista from UK. He said, John made a good point. Use technology to share and reflect on the real stuff. That's it.
You have UK supporters, John. That was you. Well, that's the virtual reality.
I think it is coming very clear that
the internet or the interaction is here to stay. I think what, as a movement, we need now to empower our leaders so that they guide the young people, so that we move from only interaction, but to post some information which could be more interactive, rather than to say we have done this or we have that, like what the Messenger of Peace are currently experiencing. And also with the new website, I think people are just taking it as a Facebook, but maybe we need to develop from that further, so that as we move forward, we will have people contributing information which is more interactive, or which with more information that people can learn from each other.
Good. Oh, I think that's already time. Is there any last thought? I think that's going to be work of the reporter who is there working hard to do the final conclusions. But is there any final thought, reaction, idea? I think that at the end we've been all in the same room, not only in the virtual one, as we've seen. We thought that someone was writing from Malaysia, but that was not, was from the back of the room. But beyond that, I think that we more or less shared the ideas on the three elements. So we might try to transform this in some conclusions that could be useful.
Sorry, this is just an observation, and we are actually at the forefront. There's nobody else doing what we're doing on the internet. There's nobody doing anything like Messenger of Peace. There's nobody doing anything like international exchanges after camps, as John talked about, reflective. We are actually at the forefront. Other people from other organizations are looking at what we're doing and saying, how the hell are you doing that? I know John May's looking at it because he's probably thinking of the international award system, but generally speaking, there isn't a body of other groups doing what we're doing. So I suppose it's an obligation on us somewhat to try and do it carefully as well. Yeah. No.
Scouting is not unique, okay? Scouting is not at the front. Scouting is one of a number of organizations and a number of movements and a number of corporate organizations around the world who are discovering how to deal with technology effectively. If you try to pretend that we're at the front, then you are deluding yourself. We are, along with a whole lot of other people, beginning to take the baby steps of learning how to make this work. Let's be realistic. I'm afraid we're not at the forefront. I would agree. But we're all taking baby steps together. Let's not pretend that we're the best. We're not. We're discovering together.
And somehow this is good as well, because we could learn from the others. And I would say that I'm more into the ambition on that. I think that the good thing of that is to experience doing things that could be some kind deceiving, and we'll see what happens. But the worst thing that we could do is to rest waiting to see what happens, because what's going to happen is going to happen outside our world. So we have to be a little bit courageous and try things, knowing that many of these things are going to be mistakes, and carry on. And following your advice, listen to the boys and to the girls, who are probably our best devices to know what we should do.
Yes, I think we've come to the end of this session. We want to thank you very much for your contributions. We are going to make use of the comments and try to summarize it so that we can have it posted in the Congress report. Thank you very much. As you move out, just drop the slip I've given you as an evaluation on the box on the door. Thank you very much.